Did you know that over 60% of couples who separate say they stop feeling seen or valued by the other person? It wasn't lack of love. It was lack of conscious attention. So, the big question is, what do those women do differently who keep love alive without exhausting themselves or forcing it? In this video, we're going to reveal 15 powerful habits of women who inspire connection, tenderness, and long-term desire. And no, we're not talking about magic tricks or superhuman efforts. We're talking about daily decisions, small but deeply meaningful, that nurture the bond without becoming a burden. These habits are organized into 5 key blocks that go from daily emotional connection to self-love that sustains a relationship from within. And the best part, you can start using them today, no matter what stage your relationship is in. This approach is inspired by the ideas of Dr. Alonso Puig, doctor, speaker, and expert in behavioral neuroscience. He argues that love doesn't depend on luck, but on how we train our minds and emotions to build healthy bonds. For Puig, love is an art, but also a science. So if you want to learn to love better, to care for your relationships, and to transform how you connect from an authentic and calm place, subscribe now and join us on this journey toward more conscious and lasting relationships. Now take a deep breath. Open your mind and heart, because we're about to uncover those 15 habits that keep love alive, effortlessly. We now enter the first block of this journey, the heart of every lasting relationship, daily emotional connection. We're not talking here about grand romantic gestures or fancy words, but about everyday moments where the soul of the other feels truly seen. In this block, we'll explore 3 habits that seem simple but can completely transform a couple's dynamic. And we begin with one that may seem obvious, but few really master. Listening without interrupting, with real presence. Picture this. It's the end of the day. Your partner comes home with a frown, clearly upset. They sit beside you, sigh, and start telling you what happened at work. Halfway through the first sentence, you're already drawing conclusions. Maybe you interrupt to tell a similar story from your day, or offer a quick solution. Or, even with the best of intentions, downplay their feelings by saying something like, "It's not that big of a deal." Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever been on the other side too? This habit, listening without interrupting, is easy to understand but hard to apply because it goes against something very human, our need to respond, to help, to speak. But the true gift we can give someone in a relationship is more valuable than advice, our full presence. Truly listening means being there, without trying to change each other's emotion, without rushing the ending, without getting distracted by your phone or what you'll say next. Alonso Puig explains it clearly through neuroscience. When someone listens to us with full attention, a strong sense of safety and validation is activated in the brain. The limbic system, responsible for emotions, calms down. Substances like oxytocin are released, which strengthen emotional bonding. Listening with presence from silence has a real biological effect on the emotional bond. It's not just about courtesy or good manners. It's about creating a safe emotional space where the other can open their inner world without fear of being judged or corrected. Many times, women feel we have to do it all: solve, hold, anticipate, plan. And from that multitasking mode, listening without interrupting can feel like a waste of time. But here's the nuance. It's not about quantity of time, but quality of presence. Listening for 5 minutes with full attention can be more transformative than talking for an hour with no real connection. One example. Anna and Marcos have been together for 7 years. Lately, every conversation feels like an argument. She feels he doesn't listen. He says she interrupts to correct him or get ahead of his ideas. One day, in couples therapy, the therapist suggests a simple exercise. Talk for 5 minutes without interruption. Just look, nod, and listen. At first, both feel awkward, but after a few days, something shifts. Anna realizes that by not interrupting, she starts to understand things she used to miss. Marcos notices that when he feels heard, he doesn't get defensive. The atmosphere changes. Not all their problems are solved, but a door reopens, a door that had seemed shut, the one to mutual understanding. Alonso Puig suggests that the act of listening without interrupting is an exercise in conscious presence. And that presence can only be cultivated if we learn to quiet our inner noise, the urge to give opinions, to win, to be right. According to him, true love is not sustained by logic, but by the ability to emotionally tune in with the other. When we interrupt, we break that tuning. But when we listen attentively, we create an invisible bridge that strengthens love. This habit may seem passive, but it is deeply active. It requires inner effort, regulating your impulses, holding back your ego, creating space. And it's precisely that space that allows the other person to open up. It's like watering a plant, not with more water, but with a fertile silence that lets it breathe. Because when someone feels truly heard, they lower their defenses, they soften. And from that state, it becomes much easier to resolve conflicts, express love, and build trust. So, how can we begin to cultivate this habit in daily life? Here are some concrete steps. First, consciously choose moments to listen without distractions. Put your phone away, turn off the TV, and look your partner in the eyes. If you can, place a hand on their shoulder or hold their hand. Gentle physical contact reinforces emotional attention. Second, resist the urge to respond right away. When your partner speaks, breathe slowly. Nod. Allow pauses. Even if you want to reply, wait at least 3 seconds after they finish talking. That small space allows their words to settle and helps you respond with more empathy. Third, ask open-ended questions instead of giving closed opinions. Instead of saying, "That doesn't make sense," try, "And how did that make you feel?" Instead of offering quick fixes, try, "What do you think you need right now?" These questions don't just show genuine interest. They invite the other to explore their experience more deeply. And fourth, make it a daily ritual. It doesn't have to be long. Maybe 10 minutes at the end of the day, a sacred space where one speaks and the other listens. And then switch roles. At first, it might feel awkward, but over time, it becomes one of the strongest pillars in a relationship. Because in the end, as Alonso Puig rightly says, love isn't destroyed by lack of passion, but by too much noise. And that noise often comes from the habit of interrupting each other, of not listening, of trying to impose our version. But when we learn to listen with presence, with humility, and with openness, something beautiful happens. The relationship stops being a battlefield and becomes an emotional refuge. So, if there's one habit that can make an immediate difference in your relationship, it's this one. It doesn't require money, extra time, or complex techniques. It just needs your decision to be present, to open your heart, and to quiet your mind. Because when you listen without interrupting, you're telling the other person, "Your world matters to me. I'm here. I don't want to change you. I just want to understand you." This is a first step, and even though it may seem small, it's the foundation of all the others. Without deep listening, no connection can last. But with it, even wounded relationships can begin to heal. And now that we understand the vital importance of listening with presence, we'll move on to the second habit within this block, one that complements this silent act with active emotional expression. We're talking about the ability to validate the other person's emotions. Because it's not enough to hear. We must also help the other feel that what they feel is legitimate and deserves space. Many times, without realizing it, we minimize or ignore what the other feels. We don't do it with bad intentions. We simply act on the automatic reflex to fix, soothe, or even protect. That's why phrases like "you shouldn't feel that way," "you're overreacting, it's not that big of a deal," or "I went through worse and didn't act like that," sneak easily into conversations. And while they may seem harmless, they actually have a destabilizing effect. They make the other person doubt their emotional experience and feel misunderstood, disconnected, even rejected. Validating is not agreeing. It doesn't mean assuming that everything the other person feels is objectively right. Validating simply means recognizing that what the other feels, they truly feel, that they have the right to experience it, and that alone deserves our attention and care. It's saying with words or actions, "I may not fully understand what you feel, but I'm here with you without judging." That gesture, which seems small, is one of the deepest acts of love there is. Alonso Puig explains that the human brain needs to feel emotionally understood in order to come out of states of stress or suffering. When someone feels invalidated, the brain's amygdala is activated, the area that reacts to threats. The body enters defense mode, communication shuts down, and emotional connection weakens. But when someone feels validated, the amygdala calms down, the nervous system regulates, and the prefrontal cortex is activated, the part of the brain that allows for dialogue, empathy, and reflection. That's why validating emotions isn't just nice or kind. It's an emotional and neurological intervention that creates space for trust. Let's consider a common situation. A couple, after an argument during a family gathering, comes home. One of them is clearly upset. They say something like, "I felt really uncomfortable with the comment your brother made, and you didn't say anything." The other, instead of validating, responds defensively, "It wasn't that bad. You always make a drama out of everything." With that response, the conflict not only remains unresolved, it gets worse. The person who felt hurt now also feels alone, misunderstood, invalidated. But that same initial phrase, "I felt uncomfortable with your brother's comment," receives a different response, such as, "I understand that hurt you. I know those topics are hard for you, and I'm sorry I didn't react at the time." Everything changes. There may not yet be a solution, but a space has been created to talk, heal, and reconnect. Validating is not a concession. It's an invitation to keep building from mutual respect. A common trap is believing that validating emotions means reinforcing behaviors we don't approve of. For example, if a partner is very jealous or insecure, it might seem like validating their emotions will feed that insecurity. But it's the opposite. When someone feels that their emotion is recognized, its intensity usually decreases. The person stops fighting to be heard and begins to listen too. It's as if the simple act of saying, "I see you're feeling this," deactivates the need to shout it out. Mario Alonso Puig mentions that healthy relationships aren't built from logic, but from emotional attunement. And attunement isn't achieved just with well-spoken ideas, but with an internal willingness to embrace the other's world without needing to correct it. That's why, many times, when someone is hurt, they don't need explanations or to be told they're right, or to be given a solution. They simply need someone to sit next to them emotionally and say, "What you feel makes sense." In practice, validating emotions requires presence, humility, and curiosity. Presence to be there fully, humility to not impose your own view, and curiosity to understand where the other person's feeling is coming from. It means looking beyond words, observing body language, tone of voice, what's not said but is expressed, then responding with phrases that open and support, like, "I understand why you feel that way. That must have been hard for you. I can see this is really affecting you." A couple that practices this habit consciously builds a very solid emotional foundation, because when we know our emotions will be welcomed, we dare to show more of ourselves. We share fears, desires, wounds, joys, and that openness creates real intimacy. It's no longer about agreeing on everything, but about being present for each other through everything. This habit also involves working on ourselves, because sometimes when it's hard to validate the other's emotions, it's because we haven't learned to validate our own. Maybe we grew up in environments where crying was seen as weakness or expressing anger was punished. So, when we see intense emotions in someone else, our defense mechanism is triggered. Learning to validate others also teaches us to validate ourselves, to accept that feeling is part of being alive and of loving. To cultivate this habit in daily life, there are simple but deep practices. First, when you notice that your partner expresses something emotional, anger, sadness, insecurity, excitement, pause for a moment and ask yourself, how can I support this without correcting it? How can I respond from empathy, not from logic? Second, listen to the emotional content behind the words. If your partner says, "I can't take this job anymore," instead of replying with "then just quit," try saying, "I can see it's really draining you. Do you want to talk about it?" Sometimes the problem has no immediate solution, but validating the emotion offers relief. Third, be mindful of your language. Replace phrases like, "It's not a big deal," with, "I understand this is important to you." Replace "you're overreacting" with, "I know this touches a sensitive nerve. Do you want to tell me more?" Language is a vehicle of connection, and if we use it gently, it can heal instead of hurt. Validating emotions also means learning to be there for the other person, even when we don't fully understand what they're feeling. You don't need to have gone through the same thing, to offer support. Sometimes it's enough to say, I don't know exactly how that feels, but I'm here and I want to understand you. That attitude is more powerful than any technical solution. In short, validating someone's emotions is not a superficial gesture. It's a deep act of connection and love. It takes practice because it goes against many automatic reactions. But the effects are visible. More trust, fewer conflicts, deeper intimacy. A relationship where both people feel emotionally seen has more tools to face challenges, more reasons to stay united, and more space for love to grow without tension or wear. With the first two habits, we've begun to build a solid foundation of emotional connection, listening with full attention and validating what the other person feels. Both are essential, but there's a third pillar often underestimated because it seems too obvious, saying, I love you through small actions. It's not about grand declarations or movie-style surprises. It's more of a quiet but powerful practice of everyday love. Because while words have their place, it's the consistent gestures that truly sustain the experience of love over time. In many relationships, as the years go by, the phrase, I love you starts to fade or becomes a repeated formula without much intention behind it. Some people even stop saying it altogether, convinced that it's already known, that there's no need to repeat it. But love is not a state to be taken for granted. It's an energy that needs to be renewed through actions, especially when routine, obligations, or conflict begin to dim the spark. That's why one of the most effective ways to keep that spark alive is to consciously incorporate small daily actions that say what we sometimes forget to express in words. You matter to me. I'm thinking of you. I'm here with you. These actions don't require major resources or extra time. They're simple gestures. Making coffee the way your partner likes it, leaving a kind message during the day, offering a hug for no reason, covering them with a blanket when they've fallen asleep on the couch, fixing something at home before it becomes a problem. These small choices say, without needing to speak, I'm present in your life. Mario Alonso Puig says that love, like any human skill, needs to be practiced. And it's the repeated acts done with positive intention that shape not just our relationships, but also our inner emotional state. Neuroscience confirms that when we act kindly, even in small ways, our brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, creating a sense of well-being in both the giver and the receiver. These gestures not only strengthen the bond between partners, but also transform us from within. Let's consider a daily example. A couple has been living together for years. Work, kids, and house duties have made each day feel like a mechanical schedule. One partner begins to feel invisible, as if there's no space left for tenderness. There are no fights, but no affection either, until one day the other, without any warning, leaves a note next to breakfast that says, "Thank you for being here, even when I don't say it. I love you." That small gesture breaks the pattern. The person who felt forgotten suddenly feels seen again. It's not just what was written. It's the fact that it was done. These small actions are the raw material of lasting love. And what's most interesting is that they don't always have to be spontaneous. They can be planned, intentional, designed as part of a care ritual. Some people worry that if something doesn't come naturally, it loses its value. But the truth is, mature love doesn't depend on constant spontaneity. It depends on the decision to care for the other even when you're not in a romantic mood, even when you're tired in routine or under stress. A practical way to cultivate this habit is to observe which small details have the greatest positive effect on the other person. Everyone has their preferred love language. For some, it may be a physical gesture, a touch, a back massage, an unexpected kiss. For others, it may be practical help. Handling a bothersome task, cooking their favorite meal, tidying up a space you knew they wanted to see clean. Some value-written words, tiny surprises, or simply being asked how their day went and being listened to without glancing at the phone. Identifying that language and acting accordingly is a sign of deep empathy, and it's not necessary to do it every day in large amounts. It's enough to keep the habit of not letting too much time go by without a visible sign of affection, because love doesn't die from lack of grand gestures. It dies from the ongoing absence of small ones. Mario Alonso Puig mentions that what most feeds internal motivation is not great successes or grand words, but micro moments of connection and meaning. The same happens in a couple. It's those brief but intentional moments that build a solid relationship. And I love you when heading out the door, a soft glance in the kitchen, a good morning message when one is away. None of that is insignificant. They are the invisible stitches that keep the emotional fabric of the couple together. In addition, there's an unexpected but very powerful consequence of this habit. When one starts expressing love through small actions without demanding immediate reciprocity, it often triggers a mirror effect. The other person, feeling cared for, responds in a similar way, not because they were asked to, but because a desire to return the gesture is awakened. A positive dynamic is created, one that feeds itself, a virtuous circle instead of a chain of complaints or demands. Of course, it doesn't always go that way. There are cases in which one gives and the other doesn't seem to notice. That's where the importance of communication comes in. Also saying, gently and without reproach, I did this because I wanted you to know how much you matter to me. Sometimes pointing out the gesture helps the other person register and appreciate it. And if that doesn't happen, if there's no echo or resonance, then it may also be time to assess the health of the relationship. But in most cases, the love is there. It just needs to be reactivated with clear signals. This habit also becomes especially important in times of crisis or emotional distance. When words don't flow, when there's tension or discomfort, a simple action can be the first step toward reconciliation, not to force a solution, but to open the possibility of reconnection. Sometimes, making the bed for the other, preparing a hot tea, or simply sitting in silence can mean more than 1,000 speeches. To integrate this habit in a practical way, you can start with a small daily commitment, consciously choosing one loving gesture to do during the day. It doesn't have to be perfect or original or big. It just needs to be intentional. That intention is what turns an everyday act into an emotional message. You can also create a personal or shared list of actions that make me feel loved and check it occasionally for inspiration, not as a duty, but as a source of ideas to nurture the bond. In summary, saying I love you through small actions is one of the most powerful habits to keep love alive. Because love needs nourishment, and that nourishment isn't always words, but everyday acts that, repeated with tenderness, become emotional anchors. As Mario Alonso Puig would say, love grows not from the intensity of occasional gestures, but from the consistency of small ones. And that consistency is cultivated every day with the decision to be present, to care, to show love beyond words. Take a moment and ask yourself, which of these 3 emotional connection habits resonated with you most today? The one you already practice and has worked for you, or the one that's hardest for you to apply? Tell me in the comments. Let's open this space as a circle of reflection and learning among people who want to love better, with more awareness and less ego. Having concluded the section dedicated to daily emotional connection, we now take a step closer to the heart of what truly binds two people over time: authenticity and vulnerability. This second section invites us to look beyond visible dynamics and connect with what we often avoid showing out of fear, habit, or pride. Because if true love seeks intimacy, it cannot be built on masks or edited versions of who we are. It is built with truth, with unfiltered emotions, with shared stories, even when they hurt or scare us. And that's why the fourth habit we'll explore today is as powerful as it is challenging: sharing fears and dreams. Talking about what we fear and what we most long for shouldn't be something exceptional in a relationship, but in practice, it often is. Many times, we get used to superficial coexistence where we discuss logistical plans, daily topics, or even minor arguments, but we don't go deeper into what's truly beating inside. And the truth is that opening that space for mutual vulnerability can completely change the quality of the bond. It not only brings the other person closer, but also helps us feel more whole and more secure within the relationship. Sharing fears is not the same as complaining or dramatizing. It means speaking honestly about insecurities, past wounds, doubts that still live in us, without asking the other to fix them, but simply to hold them. For example, saying, "I'm afraid of not being enough. I'm scared you'll get tired of this someday. I fear repeating my parents' mistakes," isn't a sign of weakness, but of trust. It takes deep courage to show that part of ourselves we don't fully control. But that's also where more human and real connection is built. The same goes for dreams. Many couples rarely talk about what they truly dream of. Not just in terms of tangible goals like buying a house or traveling, but soul dreams, living more freely, feeling more useful, experiencing something new, discovering themselves in a new stage of life. When we share these desires, we not only reveal our deepest hopes, but also give our partner the chance to support us, to walk alongside us, to be inspired. Dreams that aren't shared often fade, but those that are expressed and listened to with respect can turn into shared projects. Mario Alonso Puig speaks a lot about the power of conscious vulnerability. He says that showing ourselves from our inner truth, far from weakening the bond, actually strengthens it. From his neuroscientific view, sharing from genuine emotion activates brain circuits related to empathy, emotional resonance, and cooperation. A shared fear becomes lighter, and a shared dream more attainable. In that exchange, the brain creates positive connections, builds meaningful memories, and establishes an emotional language that goes beyond words. A realistic example: a couple that's been together for years starts to feel distant. There are no big fights, but a sense of routine. One day, one of them decides to open up and says, "I've been thinking a lot about how I want to live the next phase of my life, and I realize I'm scared of staying in a place where I don't feel fulfilled." That conversation, instead of causing rejection, sparks a similar reflection in the other. They discover that both had fears they never dared to express, and also desires they never imagined together. From that dialogue, their relationship changes. Not because everything got solved right away, but because now they speak from the root, not from the surface. Cultivating this habit requires certain key conditions: an atmosphere of respect, quiet moments, and above all, the willingness of both to listen without judgment. Because opening the heart only makes sense if the other knows how to take care of it. If someone expresses their deepest fear and is met with judgment, mockery, or an impatient solution, they're unlikely to try again. But if they're met with quiet attention, with a look of support and a "thank you for trusting me," then a sacred space opens up in a relationship. It's also important to know when and how to share these emotions. It's not about forcing deep conversations every day. It's about noticing those moments of closeness when another layer can be released. It might be a quiet evening, a walk without distractions, or even a letter if speaking out loud feels too hard. What matters is allowing the other to truly see us, even in what we haven't figured out yet. And here comes another key aspect. Sharing fears and dreams also means listening to the others without trying to correct them. Sometimes when our partner says, "I'm afraid I'll fail at this," we reply with, "Don't say that, you'll do great," thinking we're helping, but in reality, we're invalidating. Instead, saying, "I get it, that fear is real and I'm with you," has a much deeper emotional impact. The same goes for dreams. Even if we don't fully understand them, we can say, "I love that you dream of that. How do you picture it?" Being open to what the other dreams of, without immediately trying to ground it, is an act of love and trust. To practice this habit, you can start with simple but powerful questions. Asking, "Is there something you're afraid of lately that you haven't told me?" Or, "What are you dreaming about for your life in the next few years?" can open up conversations that haven't happened before. You can also begin by sharing something you hadn't said. Sometimes when one person dares, the other feels freer to do the same. Ultimately, sharing fears and dreams is a way of saying, "This is who I am when I'm not protecting myself." And by showing ourselves like that, we not only strengthen a bond, but also free ourselves a bit from the weight of maintaining a constant image. Mario Alonso Puig says that the mind needs internal coherence to be at peace. And coherence is achieved when what we feel, think, and show are aligned. That's why opening these spaces of vulnerability not only benefits the couple, but also our individual emotional health. This habit is not about becoming emotionally dependent or expecting our partner to resolve our fears or fulfill all our dreams. It's about allowing the other to be part of our inner journey, of our evolution, of our truth, and doing the same in return. In that crossroads, authentic, deep, and alive relationships are built. After opening ourselves to the power of sharing fears and dreams, we reach the fifth habit, showing gratitude every day. This habit, although it may seem minor compared to other deeper or more complex ones, has an immense and often underestimated impact on the emotional health of a couple. It's not just about saying thank you out of politeness, but about cultivating a conscious attitude of appreciation toward the other person, recognizing what they do, who they are, what they represent, and doing so daily, not only when something exceptional happens. Gratitude is one of the most powerful gestures of emotional connection because it reminds the other person that they are seen, valued, and needed in a stable, long-term relationship where routine can make many acts of care or presence invisible. Gratitude becomes a tool to avoid taking the other for granted. It's an emotional language that says, I notice you and I don't ignore you. When someone feels recognized, they also feel more loved and more motivated to keep building. In many relationships, conflicts don't arise from big mistakes, but from small omissions that pile up. And one of the most common is lack of recognition. It's assumed that what the other does, cooking, listening, accompanying, caring, working, maintaining a home, planning, supporting, is simply their duty. But that duty, when not valued, becomes an emotional burden. On the other hand, when it's appreciated, it becomes a shared act, a worthwhile choice. Mario Alonso Puig speaks of the power of gratitude as one of the healthiest mental states for the brain. From neuroscience, we know that feeling and expressing gratitude activates a reward system, improves mood, and lowers cortisol levels, the stress hormone. In the context of a couple, this means that when we give thanks, we not only improve a bond, but we also do good for ourselves. Gratitude changes the focus of attention. Instead of looking at what's missing or what's not working, we begin to see what is already there, what holds, what matters. Let's think of an everyday situation. A person gets home after an exhausting day. Their partner has made dinner, tidied up the space, and left a cup of tea ready. If this happens frequently and is never mentioned, it can start to feel like an obligation. But if the one arriving takes a moment and says, "Thank you for thinking of me. I know you had a long day too," that simple gesture completely changes a moment's perception. It validates the effort, revalues a relationship, and strengthens a connection. Showing gratitude every day doesn't require a big display. Sometimes it's enough to look the other in the eye and say, "I love how you do this. I appreciate that you were there for me today. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for staying quiet when I needed it. Thank you for being." Even a short message during the day, a note on the fridge, a meaningful hug can do the job. The point is for the other to feel that their presence and gestures don't go unnoticed. One of the keys to making this habit work is being specific. It's not just about repeating thank you like a formula, but expressing clearly what is being appreciated. For example, instead of saying thanks for everything, which is generic and easy to forget, it's much more powerful to say, "Thanks for remembering what I like for dinner. It made me feel cared for." Specificity helps the message reach the heart, and it also trains the mind to notice more positive details in daily life. Another important point is not to wait for special occasions to give thanks. Many times, we save gratitude for birthdays, anniversaries, special dates. But for gratitude to transform, it must be daily. Not because everything is perfect, but precisely because nothing is. Being thankful for the imperfect, the ordinary, what's sustained with love, is an act of humility and commitment. Mario Alonso Puig says that the brain, when it gets used to being grateful, changes the way it interprets reality. It stops focusing on flaws and starts valuing what works. This doesn't mean denying problems or avoiding conflict, but balancing the emotional scale. In a relationship where only mistakes are pointed out, the bond erodes. But in one where successes are also appreciated, trust and the willingness to grow both increase. That's why a very simple yet effective practice is the gratitude of the day. At the end of each day, take a moment to think of one specific thing you're thankful for in the other person. It can be an action, an attitude, a word, a gesture, and if it's expressed, even better. Some couples even make this a closing ritual. Before going to sleep, say something they appreciate about the other that day. It's brief but powerful. It changes the emotional atmosphere and strengthens the emotional bond. This habit can also be useful during difficult moments. When there's tension or discomfort, remembering something we do value about the other can soften the heart. It's not about ignoring the problem, but about remembering that beyond the conflict, there's a bond that deserves care. Saying, "Today wasn't a good day between us, but I really appreciate that you try to listen to me." can be the beginning of reconciliation. Showing gratitude every day also transforms the way we speak to our partner. It reduces automatic criticism and increases recognition. Instead of saying, "Finally, you did this," we can say, "Thank you for taking care of that. I know you did it for both of us." This kind of communication not only strengthens the other person's self-esteem, but also creates a space of greater cooperation and mutual respect. Also, when one starts to express gratitude, they begin to receive more gratitude too, not as a demand, but as a natural consequence. The energy of appreciation creates an emotional climate that invites reciprocity. And if it doesn't happen immediately, at least it leaves the internal satisfaction of having acted from recognition, not from demand. Ultimately, showing gratitude every day is a habit that not only strengthens a relationship bond, but also transforms us as individuals. It helps us see more what we have than what's missing, to connect to the present instead of always waiting for something extraordinary. As Mario Alonso Puig would say, gratitude is not just an emotion, it's a way of seeing life. And when life is seen with gratitude, love finds more reasons to stay. Now that we've understood the power of daily gratitude in a relationship, it's time to close this second section dedicated to authenticity and vulnerability with one of the most transformative, yet also one of the most challenging habits: being yourself, even when it's scary. This sixth habit is not a romantic slogan or an inspiring quote for social media. It's actually a daily practice of emotional courage. Because at the heart of every deep bond lies a desire to be loved, not for what we seem to be, but for who we truly are. In a relationship, it's easy to fall into the habit of adapting, of softening part of ourselves to avoid conflict, to please the other, or simply out of fear of rejection. At first, it may seem harmless, holding back an uncomfortable opinion, pretending something doesn't bother us, laughing at something that actually irritates, avoiding showing a vulnerable side out of fear of looking weak. But over time, these small silences turn into internal disconnection. And the most serious part is that disconnection gets transmitted. The other person senses something's off, that the energy doesn't flow as before, even if they can't say exactly why. Being yourself, even when it's scary, means standing by your truth without forcing on the other, but also without hiding it. It means saying, "This is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I need." Even if we know it might not be well received, might be uncomfortable, might even shake the comfort of the relationship. It's choosing inner coherence over momentary approval. And paradoxically, it's also what allows a stronger love to grow, because there is no real connection without authenticity. Mario Alonso Puig speaks clearly about this. He says one of the biggest enemies of emotional well-being is self-deception, and that when we stop being ourselves to please others, we lose an essential part of our identity. From a neuroscience perspective, this has a deep impact. The brain gets stressed when it acts against its true values or emotions. An internal tension is triggered that, if sustained over time, can lead to physical symptoms, emotional fatigue, and even depression. On the other hand, when we act from authenticity, the nervous system regulates itself, the body aligns, and the relationship strengthens. A simple example: someone feels they need more personal space but doesn't dare to ask for it, afraid their partner might see it as rejection. So they keep giving in again and again until they start to feel suffocated. That accumulated discomfort turns into emotional distance, irritability, or disconnection. But if instead that person calmly says, "I realize I need a bit more time for myself to recharge, and it's not about moving away from you. It's about taking care of myself," the conversation changes. It might not be easy, but at least it's real. It opens the door to mutual understanding. This habit also applies to passions, personal interests, and opinions that may differ from the other person's. In many couples, over time, one or both start to let go of what defines them as individuals in order to blend into a shared identity. While it's natural to build a common space as a couple, it's also essential to preserve who each person is. What they want, dream of, fight for, even if the other doesn't fully share it. A healthy relationship doesn't demand constant sacrifice, but agreements that respect differences. Being yourself, even when it's scary, also means allowing yourself to be vulnerable, not just defending your opinions or needs, but letting others see what hurts, what you don't know how to handle, what is still in progress. Some believe that in a relationship one must appear strong, resolved, always stable. But that expectation is artificial. In reality, what brings two people closer is not perfection, but shared truth. Be able to say, I feel insecure today. This is hard for me. I don't know how to manage this part of me. And to be received without judgment is one of the deepest acts of intimacy one can experience. Practically speaking, cultivating this habit starts with noticing where we act from fear and not from truth. Asking, what parts of myself am I leaving out to avoid discomfort? What things do I not say for fear of what the other may think? When do I start feeling that I lose myself just to keep the peace? These questions aren't easy, but they're necessary. Because every time we give up an essential part of who we are, self-love is weakened. And in time, so is the love we feel for the other person. It's important to clarify that being yourself doesn't mean acting without filters or care for the other. It's not about saying everything you think without empathy, nor imposing your own pace. Being yourself within a relationship is a balanced act. Telling the truth with love, defending your identity with respect, expressing limits without hurting. When this happens, the relationship grows richer. There's more trust, more freedom, more chances to grow together without feeling trapped. It's also essential that this habit is reciprocal, to foster a space where the other also feels free to be who they are, where they can change their mind, show their contradictions, feel their emotions without fear of being corrected or dismissed. In that kind of emotional atmosphere, authenticity blooms. And when that happens, the relationship stops being a social mask and becomes a refuge of truth. Alonso Puig says that human beings need three things to fully thrive: to feel accepted, to feel valued, and to feel free to be authentic. A relationship where these three conditions are met is a source of growth, not only emotional, but personal. Because being with someone who sees you as you truly are and still chooses to stay is one of the most powerful experiences there is. Being yourself, even when it's scary, is an act of self-love that strengthens shared love. It's the conscious decision to live with integrity, even when it hurts. It's also a way of inviting the other to do the same. When one shows up truthfully, often the other feels safer to lower their own masks. And that's where more mature, honest, and deeper love is born. As you now know, being yourself in a relationship isn't always easy, but it's the greatest act of love you can offer. Tell me in the comments, what part of yourself are you learning to show without fear? And if this section resonated with you, leave a red heart or the emoji that best represents your truth. This space is yours. Let's read each other, support each other, and grow together. After exploring the world of authenticity and vulnerability, we now enter a realm just as deep but much quieter. The realm of emotional wisdom and maturity. This third section isn't so much about what is felt or openly expressed, but about what is regulated, understood, and consciously chosen in the inner world. Because being in a relationship isn't only about sensitivity and openness, it also involves emotional intelligence and the ability to handle difficult moments with perspective and balance. That's why the seventh habit we'll explore is one of the most valuable in the long term. Choosing your battles. Every relationship has differences. Differences in style, pace, values, ways of seeing the world. And that's completely normal. In fact, it's desirable. What makes a couple strong isn't agreeing on everything, but knowing how to navigate those differences without hurting each other in the process. But this is often where we struggle. We believe that every disagreement must be resolved, that every discomfort must be voiced, that everything we feel must be shared immediately so it doesn't build up. However, there's a big difference between repressing what we feel and learning to discern when it's truly worth starting conversation and when it's better to let it go. Choosing your battles doesn't mean staying silent out of fear, nor resigning out of habit. It's an emotional skill that comes from awareness and maturity. It means being able to tell when a situation truly affects the relationship or your personal values in a meaningful way, and when it's just a daily friction that doesn't need to be magnified. It means asking, will this thing that's bothering me still matter in an hour, a day, a week? Am I reacting from an unresolved wound or from a real need? Do I want to be right or do I want peace? Alonso Puig insists that not every emotion must turn into immediate action. Sometimes, the wisest thing is to pause, breathe, and reflect on what's really happening inside before speaking. Because many couple arguments don't come from the present, but from past baggage. unspoken expectations, or accumulated frustrations. When we lack that inner space for observation, we tend to react automatically. But when emotional wisdom is cultivated, we learn not to get hooked by every stimulus, not to turn every misunderstanding into a battle. Let's think of a common scenario. Someone comes home and their partner doesn't greet them warmly. Instead of immediately assuming they're upset and starting an argument with phrases like, "What's wrong with you?" or "You're acting like that again," the person pauses. They wonder if their partner had a bad day, if it's truly something personal, or they're projecting their own insecurity. Maybe they decide not to say anything at that moment and instead offer silent support. A while later, their partner shares they had a rough day at work. If they had reacted without filter, the situation could have escalated. But by choosing not to fight over something superficial, the connection was preserved. This doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or injustice. Choosing your battles isn't about accepting the unacceptable. It's precisely about distinguishing what's essential from what's temporary. In a mature relationship, one can express their feelings without turning every detail into a fight. They can calmly speak about what hurts without turning each disagreement into a power struggle. Because often, the fight to be right pushes people further apart than the original mistake did. From a neuroscience perspective, Puig explains that when we enter reaction mode, the brain's amygdala is activated, which leads us to act impulsively, to attack or flee. But if we're able to pause, even for a few seconds, the prefrontal cortex activates. And that part of the brain is what allows us to think, choose, and prioritize. That's where the decision is made to either escalate a conversation or turn it into an opportunity for understanding. To practice this habit, you can start with a simple tool, the conscious pause. Before responding to something upsetting, take 3 slow breaths and ask yourself, does this really deserve discussion? Or am I just seeking momentary relief by taking it out on the other person? Often, just making that pause shifts the energy. What seemed urgent loses intensity, and a calmer perspective emerges. Another key aspect is learning to let go of pride. Sometimes, what keeps us in a useless fight isn't the topic itself, but the need to be right, to win, to prove something. But when you love with maturity, you understand that the goal is not to defeat the other, but to protect the bond. Yielding isn't always losing. In fact, many times it's a way of nurturing love. It's also important to learn when and how to talk. If there's something that needs to be said, it doesn't have to be right away or in the worst moment. You can wait for the right context with calmer energy, so the message is heard and not perceived as an attack. Sometimes, letting a strong emotion pass as a repression is allowing it to settle so it can be expressed more clearly and lovingly later. Alonso Puig suggests that one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence is the ability to prioritize inner peace over the need for control. And this applies perfectly to relationships. If every small difference turns into a fight, the relationship wears down. But if there's wisdom to choose battles, to stay silent with grace when it adds nothing, and to speak clearly when it matters, the relationship becomes a much more harmonious, freer, and more sustainable space. Choosing your battles also means recognizing when the other person is having a bad moment and not taking it personally. Being able to read the emotional state of your partner, understanding that not everything they say or do is a direct message to you. This requires empathy, but also emotional maturity. And that maturity is built day by day by choosing when to speak and when to simply hold space in silence. In short, this habit is a conscious act of love. It's telling your partner, I value you enough not to fight over everything, not to let every difference become a battlefield. It's also an act of self-compassion, not carrying the stress of unnecessary conflict, not letting ego control the conversation. It is ultimately a way of loving with intelligence. We now arrive at a habit that can make the difference between a conversation that builds and one that wounds, between a bond that grows and one that gradually fractures. Speaking from calm, not from a wound. This habit involves more than moderating your tone of voice or avoiding shouting. It's a deeply conscious way of communicating, where not only words matter, but also the emotional energy from which those words are spoken. In every relationship, there are moments of tension, frustration, pain. What determines the health of the bond is not the absence of those moments, but how they are handled. Many arguments that end badly don't do so because of what is said, but because of how and when it is said. Sometimes behind a phrase that sounds offensive or destructive, there's actually an emotion that didn't know how to express itself. Fear, sadness, insecurity, exhaustion. But if that emotion speaks from the wound, from the immediate reaction, without being processed first, it will most likely cause more pain instead of healing what already hurts. Speaking from the wound is speaking when emotion is overflowing, when there's no filter, when we seek to protect ourselves by attacking. It's that impulsive form of communication where words shoot out like arrows, often with the unconscious intention of making the other feel what we're feeling. Pain, guilt, frustration. The problem is that this type of communication doesn't build bridges. It builds walls. And although it might bring momentary relief, it leaves marks that, over time, become scars that are hard to erase. Speaking from calm, on the other hand, requires time, awareness, and willingness. It means waiting for the strongest emotion to pass, to be able to see more clearly what it is we really want to say. It's not the same to shout, "I can't take this relationship anymore," in the middle of a fight as it is to say, the next day and from a place of serenity, "There are things I'm struggling with and I'd like us to talk about them calmly." In the first case, there's a defensive reaction that can deeply wound the other. In the second, there is openness, respect, and a possibility for resolution. Alonso Puig states that the quality of our communication depends on the emotional state we are in when we speak. From neuroscience, he explains that when we are emotionally upset, our brain enters survival mode. The limbic system is activated, our empathy and reasoning capacities are reduced, and we tend to exaggerate, generalize, or misinterpret what the other person says. In that state, it is not advisable to have important conversations. But if we learn to pause, to self-regulate, and to speak only when we can do so from a more centered place, communication is transformed. Imagine this situation. Someone feels their partner has been distant. Instead of waiting to calm down and speaking from their real need, they explode by saying, "You're never here. You're always somewhere else. I'm tired of feeling invisible." That phrase, born from the wound, contains a valid emotion, but the way it is expressed hurts, disorients, and puts the other on defensive. But if that same person, hours later, approaches and says, "Lately I've been feeling disconnected from us, and that makes me feel alone. I'd like to talk about it with you," the message is not only clearer, but also more effective. The emotion is still there, but now it's framed in a language that opens possibilities. Speaking from calm doesn't mean hiding what you feel. It means respecting the emotional process enough not to let the pain speak for you. It's giving emotion a place without letting it take full control of the conversation. And this takes practice, because it's not always easy to identify when we are speaking from the wound. Sometimes we think we are being rational, but we are still reacting from an undigested emotion. A useful tool for developing this habit is the conscious emotional pause. When you feel something affecting you, instead of reacting immediately, give yourself time. It could be a short walk, a few minutes in silence, writing down what you feel, or even asking the other person to give you a moment before speaking. That pause is not avoidance. It's self-care. And it's also an act of love toward the other, because it prevents the conversation from becoming an emotional battlefield. Another tool is speaking from the I and not from the you. Instead of accusing or pointing fingers, express how you feel, what you need, what you want. For example, instead of saying, "You never listen to me," say, "I feel ignored when I try to talk and there's no response." That small change in language prevents the other from becoming defensive and increases the chances of being truly heard. Alonso Puig also speaks about the power of breathing and mindfulness to regulate our emotions before we communicate. A deep breath, a conscious pause, a moment to reconnect with the body before speaking can make a big difference in how we express what we feel. Serenity is not passivity. It is clarity. And from that clarity, words become more precise, more compassionate, more effective. This habit also involves being patient with yourself. We won't always manage to speak from calm. There will be moments when the wound speaks first. But what matters is being able to recognize it, apologize if necessary, and try again. Emotional maturity isn't about never making mistakes, but about learning from each one and cultivating a better response next time. Speaking from calm also builds trust in the relationship. When the other person knows they won't be attacked, that they can listen without being hurt, they open up more, let their guard down, and become more receptive. And that creates a virtuous circle of communication, where both feel safe to say what's really going on inside. Because when words don't wound, silence no longer hurts. Now that we've explored this essential habit, we're ready to move on to another act of emotional wisdom that can be just as challenging but profoundly necessary. Learning to give space without fear. Understanding that love is not measured by how much time we spend together, but by the freedom with which each person can breathe within the relationship. This habit is perhaps one of the hardest to apply in real life because it challenges many cultural beliefs about love. We've largely been raised on the idea that true love is shown through constant presence, total availability, a kind of being there for the other that often turns into fusion or dependence. However, the healthiest and most lasting love is not fed by control or constant presence, but by the deep trust that allows each person to have their own space and still choose to come back. Giving space in a relationship doesn't mean emotional distance or lack of interest in what the other is going through. It means recognizing that both are complete individuals with their own timing, with inner processes that sometimes require silence, solitude, movement, introspection. Giving space is respecting the other's need to be with themselves, to do something without sharing it, to disconnect momentarily in order to reconnect later with more clarity. And it also means being able to ask for that space for yourself without guilt or fear of being misunderstood. Often, what makes this habit difficult isn't the relationship itself, but unresolved personal wounds. The fear of abandonment, emotional insecurity, memories of past relationships where giving space marked the beginning of growing apart. These can make many people experience space as a threat, but this is where emotional maturity makes a difference. Because when a relationship is well cared for, giving space doesn't weaken the bond. It oxygenates it, refreshes it, strengthens it. Alonso Puig speaks of emotional space as an essential element for inner growth. According to him, people need moments of disconnection from their surroundings to truly hear what their mind, body, and soul are asking for. In a couple, respecting that space is not only an act of love toward the other, it's also an act of humility, understanding that not everything the other person needs revolves around us, that there are quests, questions, and processes that belong solely to them. Let's think of a common example. Someone has a tough day, full of noise, demands constant interaction. When they get home, they don't want to talk. They just want silence, rest, some time alone. If their partner interprets that as coldness, rejection, or lack of interest, conflict may arise. But the response is, "I understand you need your space. I'll wait." A respectful, caring atmosphere is created that allows the person to recover and return with greater openness. It's not distance that hurts, but the lack of understanding. Giving space also means not invading emotionally, not demanding immediate answers, not pressuring the other to say or feel something before they're ready. In many arguments, what hurts most isn't the disagreement itself, but the feeling of not being able to breathe within the relationship. Constant pressure wears people down. But when there's trust to say, "I need to think," or "I want to be alone for a while," and that doesn't become a source of drama, the bond is strengthened because it feels freer, and love needs freedom in order to flourish. This habit also requires clear communication. Space should not be used as punishment or as a form of avoidance. It's not about disappearing without a word or using silence to manipulate. It's about honestly expressing what you need. "I'm processing something. Taking some distance helps me. It's not about you, it's for me." When said with truth and followed to a consistency, the other can understand and support that process without falling into anxiety. From a neuroscience perspective, Puig states that the human brain needs moments of conscious rest to integrate experiences, process emotions, and generate new perspectives. When those times are respected in a relationship, there's more clarity, more creativity, and less reactivity. That's why couples who understand and practice this habit tend to have deeper conversations, more mindful decisions, and fewer conflicts due to emotional overload. A practical tool to integrate this habit is to agree on moments of personal space as part of the relationship's rhythm. It's not about setting rigid rules, but recognizing that each person has different ways of recharging. For some, it might be a walk alone. for others an afternoon with friends, or even an individual activity within the same home. What matters is that those moments are seen as part of mutual care, not as signs of detachment. Another key point is working on inner security. Often, what prevents people from giving space to their partner is a fear that by doing so, they'll be forgotten, replaced, or abandoned. But those fears are not resolved by controlling the other, but by strengthening self-love. Knowing that you can be okay even if the other isn't constantly available allows you to love with less attachment and more freedom. And when you love from that place, the bond stops being an urgent need and becomes a genuine choice. It's also essential to validate the other person's desire for space without taking it personally. Many times, people don't ask for what they need for fear of hurting the other. But if the relationship includes this habit, space stops being a threat and becomes a tool. A brief emotional or physical retreat can be more helpful than a forced conversation or a saturated coexistence. And when you come back, you return with more enthusiasm, more presence, more love. This section has been intense, hasn't it? Now I want to ask you, which of these 3 habits do you feel you most need to integrate into your relationship? Tell me in the comments and leave a heart if you've ever struggled to give space, speak from calm, or let go of a pointless argument. Sharing your story can help others who are on the same path. This space is for sharing, healing, and growing together. After having explored the realms of emotional connection, courageous authenticity, and emotional wisdom, we now arrive at a deeply inspiring section: growth as a couple. Because although love begins in the encounter, it strengthens through shared development. It's not just about staying together over time, but evolving as individuals within the relationship. Loving is not remaining static, but growing while accompanying the other in their own process. And the 10th habit, which opens this new section, is a key tool for that shared growth: nurturing mutual curiosity. As time goes by, many couples fall into the trap of believing they already know everything about each other. Routines, living together, and daily roles create a false sense of total familiarity. But the truth is that each person is in constant transformation. No one is the same as they were a year ago, not even a month ago. That's why one of the keys to keeping a relationship alive is continuing to get to know each other, as if it were an ongoing rediscovery. Nurturing mutual curiosity means not stopping the exploration of who the other person is today, what they dream of, what they fear, what they think differently, what they are discovering about themselves. Interestingly, many relationships don't fade due to a lack of love, but due to a lack of interest. Not because there are no emotions, but because there are no more questions. When we stop being interested in the other's inner world, the connection cools down. But when we keep curiosity alive, the bond is constantly renewed. It's like saying to the other, I want to keep discovering you, not just for who you were, but for who you are becoming. Mario Alonso Puig speaks of the power of curiosity as a force that expands the mind and renews vital energy. In his view, curiosity is a driver of growth because it opens new doors, sparks creativity, and breaks monotony. Applied to couples, this means that asking questions, showing sincere interest, being surprised by the other's changes, creates emotional dynamism that keeps the relationship alive, alert, and in motion. Let's think of a simple example. A couple has been together for years. One of them starts reading about a new topic they're passionate about, but doesn't mention it much, thinking the other won't be interested. If the partner, instead of ignoring that change, asks with genuine interest, what caught your attention the most about it? They're not just opening a conversation. They're silently saying, your inner world matters to me. And that message, though it may seem small, has a deep effect on emotional intimacy. Nurturing mutual curiosity also means leaving room for novelty within routine, suggesting new activities, trying something different together, asking unusual questions, sharing books, movies, ideas, and thoughts that escape automatic dialogue. It's not about reinventing the relationship every week, but about avoiding it becoming a repeated script. The human mind needs stimulation to stay connected, and in a couple, this translates to having the constant desire to discover the other. This habit can be cultivated in many ways. One very simple way is to incorporate powerful questions into daily life. Not the usual, how was your day? Or what did you eat? But questions that open up the inner world, like, what did you learn about yourself this week? What's been challenging you lately? If you could start something new tomorrow, what would it be? These questions don't seek perfect answers. They seek connection. It's the interest behind a question that sparks the connection. Another way to nurture mutual curiosity is to notice small changes in the other person. Their way of reacting to something, a new perspective on a topic, a word they didn't use before. Instead of letting it pass, point it out with kind curiosity. "I'd never heard you say that. What sparked it?" This not only opens up dialogue, but makes the other feel seen with attention, still interesting to the one who loves them. Mario Alonso Puig says that one of the biggest mistakes in relationships is confusing familiarity with knowledge. We can spend years next to someone and still stop truly knowing them. Because knowledge isn't static, it's dynamic. It's a process that requires active curiosity, not just memory. And when a couple nurtures this curiosity, desire is rekindled, connection deepens, and the sense of discovery is kept alive. A powerful exercise to apply this habit is setting aside a moment each week for curious questions as a couple. It can be over a meal, during a walk, or before sleeping. Each one brings one or two unexpected questions, with no judgment, just for fun, to explore. They don't have to be deep questions all the time. They can also be funny, weird, creative. The important thing is to break out of autopilot. Even a question like, "If you could choose a superpower for one day, what would it be and why?" can spark a surprising conversation that brings laughter, play, and shared imagination. It's also very valuable to show enthusiasm when your partner is interested in something new. Even if you don't share that interest or don't fully understand it, simply listening attentively, asking with curiosity, and encouraging them to explore create an atmosphere of support and validation that's essential for growing together. Because when one feels they can evolve without drifting away from their partner, but rather accompanied by them, love becomes a safe space for expansion. After understanding how mutual curiosity keeps a relationship alive, we now move toward a habit that takes that spirit of discovery one step further. Cultivating shared projects. This habit unites a couple not just emotionally, but also practically, creatively, and in a meaningful way. Because sharing a life is not just about living together, loving each other, or resolving conflicts. It's also about building something together, something with purpose, direction, and meaning. A shared project is much more than planning a vacation or saving for a house. It's a joint commitment to a future vision. It can be big or small, private or public, short or long-term. What makes it a true couples project isn't the scale, but the level of emotional and collaborative involvement it requires. It's a way of saying, "I'm not just with you now, I want to create something with you moving forward." This habit is especially important in long-term relationships, where routine and work can make the couple feel stagnant or unmotivated. Without shared goals, each person might start spinning in their own world. And while there may still be love, there's no direction. But when there's a common purpose, a cause, an idea, an adventure, the couple's energy aligns toward the same goal. There's motivation, focus, renewed enthusiasm. Mario Alonso Puig speaks of the power of purpose as a force that organizes the mind, strengthens willpower, and creates emotional coherence. When a couple shares a purpose, whether it's launching a business, writing a book together, transforming a space, adopting a social cause, or raising children with certain values, it activates a different kind of energy. The dynamic shifts from you and me to us. And that us is one of the most powerful bonds that exist. A shared project also works as a container for differences. Instead of experiencing every disagreement as a personal obstacle, it becomes a shared challenge. For example, if a couple decides to start a small business, disagreements will inevitably arise. But instead of damaging the relationship, these challenges become opportunities to practice listening, negotiation, patience, and creativity. In the process of building together, you also learn to live together better. Shared projects don't need to be spectacular or visible to others. They can be as simple as renovating a house, starting a garden, adopting an exercise routine, learning something new, supporting a local cause, or keeping a couple's journal. What matters is that both partners feel they're collaborating with enthusiasm, that their combined energy creates something neither could achieve alone. That feeling of we're a team greatly strengthens a connection. An everyday example, A couple who's been together for several years feels that their bond has become more functional than emotional. Both work, take care of the kids, fulfill their responsibilities, but no longer feel the spark they once had. Instead of separating or settling, they decide to create a shared space for something that excites them both. They start cooking together every weekend, recording the recipes, and sharing them on social media as a small home cooking project. In a few months, they discover that not only are they laughing again, but they're also admiring each other again, not for what they do individually, but for what they achieve together. This habit also strengthens complicity because every project needs roles, different contributions, timing, decisions, adjustments. Each one can contribute from what they know best or enjoy most. And in that exchange, admiration appears, which is one of the least talked about but most important ingredients in a relationship. Admiring the other not only for how they love, but for what they create, for how they commit to something they believe in, for how they face challenges, is a profound way to renew desire and connection. Mario Alonso Puig suggests that when people feel part of something greater than themselves, their level of commitment, energy, and sense of purpose multiplies. In a couple, that something greater can be a shared dream, a cause, a project that transcends the individual. Because love is not just looking into each other's eyes. It's also looking together in the same direction and moving step by step toward a goal that excites both. To apply this habit, the first step is to speak openly about what excites each of you. Ask yourselves, what would you like to do that you haven't done yet? What projects excite you? What kind of things motivate you to get up with energy? From there, look for points of overlap. Not all interests need to align, but there will surely be areas where you can meet and build something together. Another useful tool is to establish rituals of joint creation. Choose a moment in the week to make progress on that project, no matter how small. Set realistic goals. Celebrate progress. And above all, maintain motivation from the emotional side, not just efficiency. Because the most valuable part of the project is not the final result, but everything that is learned, talked about, and shared along the way. Flexibility is also key. Not all projects will turn out as expected, and sometimes the journey will show that it wasn't the right path. But even that can be a growth experience. What matters is the attempt, the intention to create something meaningful together. And if it becomes necessary to change course, do it as part of the process, not as a defeat. Once we understand how shared projects strengthen the bond and give it purpose, we arrive at habit number 12, which is as essential as it is inspiring, celebrating achievements, big or small. Because in the midst of daily effort, obligations, shared goals, and personal challenges, we often forget something fundamental: to recognize and celebrate what we are achieving, what we've built, what we've overcome, even if no one else sees it. Celebrating achievements doesn't mean throwing a party every time something goes well. It means pausing, becoming aware, and honoring every step taken together. From the most evident goal, like paying off a debt, moving, fulfilling a dream, or finishing a project, to the most subtle victories, like having a week without arguments, handling a tough conversation better, or simply keeping connection alive amid the chaos. Celebrating these achievements is not a luxury or an exaggeration. It's a way to nurture a relationship with joy, gratitude, and meaning. Many couples don't separate due to a lack of love, but due to exhaustion, because there are no pauses to recognize what they're doing well, because they get into a dynamic of always focusing on what's missing, what hasn't yet been achieved, what's still pending. And when everything is constant struggle or effort, motivation is lost. On the other hand, when you celebrate, even with something simple, the couple regenerates emotionally. It's like saying, "We're making progress. This is worth it. Let's keep going." Mario Alonso Puig says the brain needs emotional rewards to sustain effort. That if everything is demand, tension, and outcomes, the emotional system becomes exhausted. But if there are moments of gratification, recognition, shared joy, then a positive chemistry is generated that strengthens bonds. Dopamine and oxytocin are released, hormones that not only create individual well-being, but also reinforce emotional attachment. In other words, celebrating is not just emotional. It has a direct impact on the chemistry of love. Let's consider a simple situation. A couple going through a tough financial time manages to stay organized for a month without overspending. Instead of celebrating that achievement, they focus on what they still have to pay. They stay stressed, tense, always looking ahead without pause. Over time, that lack of shared gratification turns into frustration. But if instead, one night they decide to have a special dinner, even with just the basics, and say to each other, "We're doing well, we're taking care of each other, we're in this together," the energy changes. Everything isn't solved, but now there's motivation, shared pride, and a positive emotional memory that reinforces the bond. Celebrating doesn't always require something material. Sometimes, a knowing look, a word of recognition, a thoughtful message, or simply an impromptu toast can create a powerful moment. What matters is the attitude, the act of acknowledging what has been achieved, no matter how small, and being grateful for it. Because deep down, every achievement, no matter how minor it seems, is a form of loving resistance against life's difficulties. A common mistake is to wait for big events to celebrate. The anniversary, the birthday, the goal achieved after years. But if the intermediate steps aren't acknowledged, the journey becomes too long and feels mechanical. Celebrating small wins is a way to keep energy alive throughout the process. It's like watering a plant not only when it blooms, but also when it first sprouts. Every small step forward deserves attention. Mario Alonso Puig suggests that one of the most powerful sources of human motivation is emotional recognition, feeling seen, valued, accompanied. When couples celebrate each other's achievements, not only is the self-esteem of the one being celebrated strengthened, but the bond between them is too, because it sends a message. I see your effort. I care about your progress. I'm happy for your success. And that kind of connection creates a strong emotional foundation that can weather any storm. This habit also helps shift away from constant complaining or focusing only on the negative. Often in relationships, more attention is given to what wasn't done, what was forgotten, what went wrong. But when we train our eyes to also see what was achieved, even if it wasn't perfect, communication becomes more balanced. It creates a healthier emotional culture where there is room for both growth and gratitude. A practical tool to build this habit is creating a weekly celebration ritual. For example, picking a day to reflect together on what went well that week, what moments were enjoyed, what challenges were successfully faced. It can be done through a quiet conversation, a shared note, or even a visible achievement calendar. What matters is having a conscious moment to honor what is being built. Another powerful approach is celebrating individual achievements within the relationship. When one person makes progress on something personal, a project, a new habit, an important decision, the other celebrates it genuinely, not from competition, but from admiration. That reinforces the idea that the relationship is not only a space for emotional support, but also a source of growth. And when one grows and the other rejoices, the bond becomes fertile ground for mutual evolution. It's also important to be creative in how we celebrate. It doesn't have to be expensive or elaborate. It could be a special walk, a note on the mirror, a shared song, an afternoon without screens, a surprise breakfast. What matters is the intention, not the size of the gesture. And that creativity keeps the relationship playful, alive, and capable of generating joy even in the middle of routine. Ultimately, celebrating achievements, big or small, is a way of honoring effort, appreciating the path already taken, and fueling motivation to keep going. It gives love a space of light, pause, and gratitude. It's a reminder that even if there's still a long way to go, a lot has already been accomplished. That even if everything isn't solved, there are still reasons to smile. And that every step taken together deserves to be honored. Because loving each other in this fast-paced, uncertain, demanding world is, in itself, an enormous achievement. After exploring how to grow as a couple through shared projects, celebrated achievements, and joint goals, we now arrive at the fifth and final block of this journey. Self-love that strengthens a relationship. Because though it may seem paradoxical, a solid relationship is not built through total fusion, but through the union of two complete individuals, self-aware, emotionally stable, and capable of taking care of themselves from within. It is here that a deep truth is revealed. Those who know how to love themselves well are far better prepared to love others in a healthy and free way. And that is why habit number 13 is so essential. Maintaining your emotional independence. Maintaining emotional independence does not mean becoming cold, distant, or uninterested. It means recognizing that, although the relationship is a space of support and containment, your inner well-being cannot depend entirely on how the other person feels, what they do, or what they say. It is taking responsibility for your emotions, without placing on the other the impossible mission of completing you or saving you from yourself. It is knowing how to accompany without absorbing, how to connect without dissolving, how to care without losing yourself. Many relationships fail not because of a lack of love, but because of an excess of emotional dependence. When one expects the other to fill inner voids they haven't wanted to face, the relationship becomes a burden. It turns into a dynamic of demand, frustration, and constant complaints. The relationship ceases to be a refuge and becomes a source of anxiety. However, when each person is capable of holding themselves emotionally, then the bond becomes a space of choice, not of need. And that changes everything. Alonso Puig explains it from a very clear neurobiological perspective. Emotional dependence activates the brain circuits of fear and hyperalertness. It makes the mind constantly look for signs of abandonment, rejection, or disinterest. Even when they don't exist, it generates anxiety, impulsiveness, and reactive behaviors. In contrast, emotional independence activates areas of the brain related to self-regulation, resilience, and authentic connection. In other words, someone who learns to calm themselves, to hold their own emotions, is in a better position to relate in a healthy way. Let's consider an everyday scene. A person is having a bad day, feeling insecure, tired, doubtful of themselves. If, instead of processing those emotions, they cling to their partner to save them, expecting specific words, perfect behavior, or constant displays of love, they will probably end up feeling even worse, because the other, no matter how much love they have, won't always know what to do. And when that happens, the disappointment multiplies. But if that same person takes a moment to breathe, to connect with themselves, to say, "This feeling is mine and I can hold it," then they regain their center. From there, they can ask for support if they need it, but without demands or unnecessary burdens. Maintaining your emotional independence also means having your own spaces, personal interests, connections beyond the couple, times for individual reflection. It is understanding that, no matter how close a relationship is, no one can be everything for someone else, and that even in the deepest love, it's vital to preserve your own identity. The couple should not absorb but accompany, should not occupy everything, but contribute from a place of freedom. This habit is not built overnight. It requires self-awareness, practice, and honesty. Many times, emotional dependence is not obvious. It disguises itself as attention, as care, as total devotion, but it becomes visible when there's anxiety to control, to know everything, to receive a certain response. It becomes evident when a change in the other completely destabilizes you, when silence, doubt, or temporary distance is interpreted as personal rejection. Emotional independence, on the other hand, allows those variations to be processed without overflow, because there is an internal foundation that supports it. A practical tool to develop this habit is learning to identify your own emotions without projecting them onto the other. For example, if you feel sadness or anger, instead of blaming, stop and ask yourself, is this mine or the other's? Where is this feeling coming from? What part of me needs to be heard right now? Often, just by taking that pause, your way of relating changes. You stop acting from lack and begin to communicate from awareness. It's also helpful to create emotional self-care routines, not as a trend, but as a real way to nourish your inner world. Activities that connect you to yourself. Writing, walking, meditating, reading, talking to someone you trust, creating something, breathing deeply. When you are emotionally nourished, you don't come to the relationship with emotional hunger, but with abundance. And from there, everything flows better. Alonso Puig insists that the mind needs space and silence to hear itself and heal. And that silence can't always happen in the middle of couple life. That's why it's so important to create personal retreat moments, even within the relationship, not as distance or punishment, but as reconnection. There are days when one needs to be with oneself without giving explanations. And when the partner understands and respects that, the relationship strengthens. This habit also includes learning not to take everything personally. When the other is silent, it's not always because something is wrong. When they're serious, it's not always about you. When they pull away a bit, it's not always due to a lack of love. Understanding this is essential to maintain inner calm, because when you stop interpreting everything as a reflection of yourself, you free yourself from many unnecessary burdens. In the end, maintaining your emotional independence is one of the most mature and loving acts you can offer your relationship. It is showing that you can stand on your own without losing yourself, that you can accompany without invading, that you can love without demanding the other to complete you, and that, far from cooling the bond, strengthens it. Because when two whole people choose each other, the relationship becomes a space of freedom, not dependence, a place of expansion, not confinement. Another habit that, although often seen as personal or individual, has a direct and deep impact on couple life is taking care of yourself physically and mentally. In a healthy relationship, each person's well-being is not only an individual responsibility, it is also an active contribution to the bond. When someone takes care of themselves, they're saying without words, I want to feel good for me, but I also want to give you the best of me. Taking care of yourself is not selfishness, vanity, or disconnection. It is a form of respect. It is understanding that to sustain a relationship that is alive, joyful, and conscious, energy, stability, and vitality are needed. And those qualities don't appear magically. They are cultivated day by day through small acts of self-love. Taking care of yourself physically does not mean fitting into imposed aesthetic standards, much less chasing superficial perfection. It means treating the body as an ally, as a part of oneself that deserves attention, rest, movement, nourishment, and listening. It means sleeping well, moving regularly, eating mindfully, staying hydrated, and resting when needed. It also means accepting the body's rhythms, transformations, and limits. Because when the body is in balance, the mind is grateful too. And from that regulated physical energy, the relationship flows with more harmony. Taking care of yourself mentally, on the other hand, implies a commitment to emotional health and inner clarity. It means asking how you truly are. It means paying attention to stress, exhaustion, and anxiety that often go unnamed. It means saying enough when you're overwhelmed. It means seeking moments of pause, introspection, healing if needed. It means surrounding yourself with people who nourish you, limiting the spaces that drain you, and if necessary, asking for therapeutic or professional help without shame. Because when your mind is at peace, you can listen more, understand more, and love better. Mario Alonso Puig speaks often about the direct relationship between the body state, the quality of thought, and the health of the bond. He explains that when someone neglects their physical self, their energy level drops, emotional tolerance lowers, and the mind enters a reactive mode. This affects the ability to communicate clearly, to listen with empathy, to resolve conflict with perspective. Similarly, when the mind is saturated, anxious, or worn down, it becomes much harder to connect with the other person from a place of calm and openness. Let's consider an everyday scene. Someone comes home after an exhausting week. They haven't slept well, eaten poorly, and had no time for themselves. At the slightest comment from their partner, they react with irritation, not because there's an actual problem in the relationship, but because they are overwhelmed inside. In another scenario, if that same person had found time to rest, to breathe, to reconnect, they would likely respond with more calm, more listening, more empathy. And that small difference can avoid an unnecessary conflict and open the door to a more loving conversation. Taking care of yourself physically and mentally also sends a powerful message to your partner. My well-being matters to me, and therefore, so does ours. Often, when someone stops caring for themselves, they do so believing they're sacrificing for the other, working more, solving everything, carrying everything. But that sacrifice ends up causing resentment, frustration, and burnout. In contrast, when there's balance, when each person takes responsibility for their energy, health, and clarity, the relationship becomes a lighter, kinder, and more vital place. This habit also means reviewing the small decisions of daily life. How are you sleeping? Are you breathing deeply at least once a day? What are you eating? What are you telling your body when you look in the mirror? What kind of thoughts are you feeding your mind? What are you saying yes to, even if it drains you? These questions aren't superficial. They are active awareness. Because everything you do with yourself will show up sooner or later and how you love. Taking care of yourself also includes making space for pleasure, for play, for joy. Sometimes we get so focused on responsibilities that we forget to enjoy. And when body and mind disconnect from enjoyment, love becomes functional, almost automatic. But when there's pleasure in the everyday, in dancing, cooking, walking, sharing a laugh, hugging without rushing, everything changes. Caring for the body and the mind is not only prevention, it is creation. Creation of well-being, tenderness, and presence. A practical tool to cultivate this habit is to establish sacred self-care routines. It doesn't have to be long or complicated. It can be as simple as 10 minutes of conscious movement upon waking, a moment to meditate or journal, a daily walk, or a meal prepared with care. What matters is that it's not easily negotiable, that it becomes an act of loyalty to yourself. And if you do it with your partner, even better. You can motivate each other, offer support, and inspire one another. You can also include shared self-care spaces, cooking something healthy together, inviting each other to rest, setting limits on work, disconnecting from screens. When both commit to being well with themselves, the relationship becomes a more harmonious space, less heavy, more luminous. Love needs available bodies, clear minds, and present hearts. And that is something you build, not something improvised. Alonso Puig says that the deepest love comes from people who respect themselves, who understand that a couple is not a fusion, but meeting of two individuals who value and support each other without abandoning themselves in the process. And that when someone is well with themselves, they don't need to burden the other with their emptiness. They can offer companionship from wholeness, from the joy of sharing. With this habit, we approach the end of this journey, and we'll close with one last practical reflection. How to remind yourself every day that you deserve healthy love, and that love begins with you, because the way you speak to yourself, treat yourself, and accompany yourself in solitude is the same way you'll allow yourself to be loved in a relationship. Let's move toward the final habit. It may seem like a simple, almost obvious statement, but the truth is, many people don't truly feel it. They may repeat it, perhaps understand it intellectually, but they don't live it from a place of deep conviction. And that difference changes everything. Because when someone doesn't fully believe they deserve healthy love, they tend to accept less than what they truly need. They tolerate draining dynamics, overextend themselves to keep someone around, lose themselves trying to please, or settle for bonds that no longer nourish them. On the other hand, when someone reminds themselves daily, not from ego but from dignity, they make different choices. They choose from awareness, not from lack. They speak more clearly, they set boundaries without guilt, and they become capable of building more fair, reciprocal, and free relationships. This habit is not an endpoint, it's a constant reminder, a daily practice that must be cultivated like an emotional muscle. Because even when you worked a lot on yourself, it's easy to fall back into old patterns. All it takes is a hurtful word, a prolonged absence, or an attitude that triggers an old wound, and the doubting thoughts come back. Am I asking for too much? Maybe I'm too sensitive? Is this really the best I can hope for? That's why it's so important to remember, with intention and presence, that the love you deserve doesn't hurt, diminish, or extinguish you. It accompanies, supports, empowers, and soothes. Alonso Puig talks about how the mind, if not trained, tends to repeat what's familiar. And often what's familiar isn't what's healthiest. It's simply what's most known. That's why, even if we've left behind toxic relationships or difficult phases, if we don't re-educate our minds and consistently reinforce our self-worth, we may attract or stay in relationships that repeat the same pattern of depletion. Not because we don't know what we deserve, but because we don't feel it as a lived inner truth. Reminding yourself every day that you deserve healthy love is about turning that truth into your emotional compass. And you can do this with concrete actions. For example, by choosing carefully who you share your time with, by walking away from those who confuse you, hurt you, or fail to value you, by deciding not to stay where you're not heard, where you're asked to be less, where your emotional needs are seen as inconvenient. You also do it every time you speak to yourself with respect, when you don't punish yourself for feeling, when you don't minimize your sensitivity, when you stop accepting emotional crumbs out of fear of being alone. This habit is also reinforced through daily self-affirmation. It's not about repeating empty phrases in front of a mirror. It's about creating a more loving, firm, and coherent inner dialogue. You can write it down, say it out loud, or think it with intention. I deserve a love that sees me, hears me, and cares for me unconditionally. I deserve to be chosen with presence, not out of habit. I deserve to feel free and safe within love, not in a state of constant alert. When you stand firmly in what you deserve, you also learn to wait patiently for what you truly want, instead of settling for what shows up first. This point is especially important, because often, out of fear of being alone or emotional exhaustion, we accept relationships that aren't aligned with what we really desire. But healthy love is not improvised. It is built through conscious choice. And it can only be built when both people are emotionally available and ready to cultivate something that nourishes them both. This habit also helps to heal, because many times we enter new relationships with past wounds, inherited patterns, and limiting beliefs. Reminding yourself that you deserve healthy love is a way of telling those wounded parts that you are now here to protect them, that you no longer have to stay where there is no reciprocity, that you no longer need to sacrifice your well-being to keep a bond, that love doesn't have to be a struggle or confusion, that it can be and should be a space of peace. And when this habit becomes constant, it also improves your current relationship, because you start to communicate what you need without fear, to set boundaries more clearly, to give from abundance, not from anxiety. You become someone who loves freely, because you are no longer asking for a constant validation, but sharing from wholeness. Healthy love is not perfect, but it is conscious, kind, patient, generous, and it starts within. Mario Alonso Puig states that the relationship we have with ourselves sets the tone for every other relationship. So, if you want to love better and be loved more deeply, start by treating yourself with more gentleness, more coherence, more commitment. You are the first person who must remind yourself of your worth, your needs, your dreams. Because when you're clear on that, others can feel it, and only those ready to love from that same level will stay. Throughout this journey, we've explored one by one 15 habits that not only strengthen romantic relationships, but also transform us as people. Because lasting love is not about luck or blind effort. It's the result of small, conscious decisions that, day by day, nurture the bond from within. Today, we did more than talk about love. We talked about how to live it better. We made our first stop at daily emotional connection. There, we discovered the power of listening without interrupting, of validating what the other feels, and of saying, I love you with actions, not just words. Then we moved on to authenticity and vulnerability, where we learned that sharing our fears and dreams, expressing gratitude daily, and being ourselves, even when it's scary, can open deep doors in the other's heart. In the block on emotional wisdom and maturity, we realize that not every argument is worth it, that speaking from calm instead of from the wound radically changes the tone of any conflict, and that giving the other space without fear is a sign of love, not of indifference. Then, in growth as a couple, we saw how stimulating mutual curiosity, building shared projects, and celebrating every achievement, no matter how small, can renew the relationship as if it were the first time. And finally, we explored self-love as a foundation of every healthy relationship. We talked about maintaining our emotional independence, caring for body and mind as an act of respect for ourselves and for the one we love, and reminding ourselves each day that we deserve healthy love, free of drama, free of struggle, full of care and truth. These 15 habits are not a magic formula or an unreachable ideal. They are real, human practices, imperfect but powerful. It's not about being perfect, but about being willing to grow, together and individually. If this content inspired you, if any idea touched a chord in you, or if you feel that this kind of love is worth building, I invite you to subscribe right now. Here we talk about real bonds, awareness, emotions, and how to love better without losing ourselves in the process. I would also be deeply grateful if you share this video with someone who you know needs it. And of course, if you'd like to receive a special greeting in the next video, comment the word infinite below. Thank you for getting this far, for listening, for opening your mind and your heart. I hope this content planted a seed in you, and that every habit you choose to practice becomes a way of reminding yourself and reminding the other that love is not improvised. It is cultivated. Until next time.